Hello, everyone. My name is Alec Biehl, and I did something momentous this summer, and that is graduate from Northwestern University with a PhD in civil and environmental engineering. So yes, claps for that, yeah. Broadly speaking, my research emphasizes how people make decisions regarding their daily travel, and specifically what motivates people to use alternatives to private vehicles, such as scooters and bikes for short-term distances, and car-sharing programs like Zipcar for long distances. Now you may be wondering, why do we care about travel behavior change? Well, earlier this year, the Chicago Tribune published a story that drivers in this city, on average, spend 138 hours stuck in traffic. That is 138 hours of frustration, anger, and unnecessary carbon emissions. And despite these concerns about mental and environmental well-being, people still use their cars. And there are several reasons why. The main one being that we're sort of trapped into owning vehicles. The infrastructure and land use in this country make it impractical or even undesirable to travel by other means. For some of you in this audience, and certainly for others in this country, the car is a symbol of status and a lot of emotional meaning. It is a way to enjoy oneself and show off. And finally, even one who wants to be more environmentally friendly might find easier ways to do so. For instance, one might want to recycle goods rather than cycle to work. But in case you didn't know, recycling is actually not as easy as throwing something in the appropriate can. And cities in the world around the world recognize this. London, Singapore, and Stockholm, among others, have introduced something known as road pricing. Basically, what that means is that during high-volume hours during the day, such as the work-home or home-work commutes, drivers are going to be charged a fee. And this is to induce a shift towards more sustainable modes of transportation, such as public transit. And the idea is that this will reduce the amount of carbon emissions and therefore save the environment. But in this country, it's probably obvious to you that this is not going to go over well. And this is because not only is this an additional economic burden on households, but it's also in some way going to be perceived as the government coming in and saying the convenience that you're used to using your own car, well, we don't want you to do that anymore. And this is going to cause an issue with your ability to participate in activities such as getting to work efficiently or shopping or going out with your friends on Friday nights. You're gonna have to find other ways. And so this is gonna lead to resistance because there's a conflict. And rather than maybe just looking at an equation, let's look at an image of this. We have our guy in the middle here, the king of the monsters, representing our self-interest, and as opposed to that, thinking about the collective good. And specifically in my research, I want to think about this in terms of cars and bike sharing. And more specifically, bike sharing to me is the opposite of a private car, because not only is it a mode of transportation that requires physical activity, but it is a shared mode, which means that it's going to challenge our norms of ownership in this country that are associated with the typical American dream. And not only do I want to challenge that, but I also want to challenge the top-down nature of road pricing. My research focuses on the design of bottom-up travel behavior change programs, which can be thought of as having the following three components. 1, we want to understand the behavior change process in general. 2, we want to understand what motivates people to maintain that new behavior, in this case, the use of bike share. And 3, what are the strategies that will encourage people to keep using that behavior and prevent relapse? In this case, this would be using your car more. And in my research, I borrow something from psychology called the Transtheoretical model, which has 2 components. First are the stages of change, shown in the center of the slide here, which represents a way to segment the population based on their readiness to change behavior, ranging from pre-contemplation, which is, oh, hell no, I won't do that, to maintenance, which is making that behavior a new habit. And on the bottom here, we have what are known as the processes of change, and they're also divided into 2 components. In the first 3 stages, we want to focus on building intention, which means changing the way that people think and feel about a behavior, and this could be cultivating values in regard to cycling. In the last 2 stages, we want to think about strategies that reinforce that behavior, and this could be something with setting more difficult goals to meet them in order to substitute for cars. And then it becomes a habit that way. And of course, this means that the most difficult transition is between preparation and action, translating that intention into a behavior. But I also want to think about this idea of maintaining a new behavior. Sure, it's nice if you save money, but research has shown that what really inspires people to change their behavior is that their quality of life improves. So we need to think about well-being and what boosts it. And so far, we see that these top two sources of well-being have been addressed in this research scheme so far. We are offering people a choice to change, and more so a choice to travel differently, but also this transportation choice is a way to get physical activity and lead a healthier lifestyle. As for these bottom two sources, well, I'm going to explain them through the results of a survey that I conducted as part of my dissertation research. And specifically, I want to build tailored strategies that move people from stage to stage in order to efficiently encourage the adoption of bike share. And this is by understanding the differences across the stages of people's characteristics, the neighborhoods they live in, and what their travel routines are. So these are some partial results. First, we want to look at identity. Identity has 4 different dimensions in the theory that I used, and we can see that it is important for different stage transitions. For instance, to move people from preparation to action, we want to highlight the fact that bike share is a source of distinction from the usual traveler. Most people drive cars. Why don't you try riding a bike? And feeling different might be something that encourages you to try it. Then once you try it, what reinforces that behavior is that bike share encourages you to feel good about yourself and boost your self-esteem. We can also think about the norms or the behavioral scripts that guide our actions. And we also see that different norms are also important for different stage transitions. For instance, in preparation, what we want to do is nudge people based on their felt obligations to maybe engage in a healthier or a greener lifestyle, and that might shift them into riding a bike. And then once they start riding a bike, they will adhere to descriptive norms or perceive social support. And what this might look like is a cycling club that makes the activity of bike share fun. But we can think about analyzing this data in another way. If we think about not only making a physical environment supportive of cycling, but a social context that is as well, how can that translate into people perceiving themselves to have greater life satisfaction? And what my research shows is that this only happens when these investments on the left here generate a sense of community amongst neighborhood residents, and therefore they perceive themselves to have greater well-being than they did before. And this is important for the design of voluntary travel behavior change programs, because this means is that yes, what we want to do is focus on that individual well-being, but we want to act at the community level and generate those social relations and that cohesion among residents that makes up that 4th dimension of well-being I showed earlier. And because we have this in mind, I'd like to share with you a very important principle that I came up with, and it is called the Alec principle. That means you want to assess your local environment and culture when you design these programs. And it goes to that idea that we want to think about behavior change on different scales, not only regarding the individual, but the communities that they're a part of. And depending on where you live, those interventions are going to be different. So tailor to the individual and community needs. And this leads us to one final equation, because truly this is an engineering talk. We are thinking about the ways to engineer behavior change, and that is focusing on well-being and focusing on community-based action. And I'm happy to say that I will continue this line of research this October at Oak Ridge National Laboratory. And thank you so much for listening.